The iPad Pro is my favorite Apple product, and I also think the iPad line has so much potential for greatness of eventually just killing off the Mac entirely as it gains more features from the Mac, as we just port more stuff over. But I'm happy to go over some of the expected changes with the iPad lineup we should see by the end of this year. Let's begin. So the iPad Pros are a messy story. So I initially remember people saying not to buy the 2020 iPad Pro because there was supposed to be a mini LED 5G iPad Pro with an A14X chip coming out as soon as October of last year. Obviously, that didn't happen, and everyone was saying, no, it got pushed to March. Now March has happened, and we're in April. It still hasn't come out. There was somewhat of a cryptic tweet from Kang, who has a very reliable track record, claiming that the iPad Pro could launch next week. So it's possible this video could be dated very, very quickly, but I hope he's right. Although there does seem to be a lot of reports saying that the global chip shortage might result in MacBooks and iPads getting delayed. So if that ends up being the case, it's possible we won't even get these mini LED iPad Pros until quadruple UDC in June, but I do expect them at some point this year. I'd be very, very surprised if they didn't launch at all. And they're supposed to be refreshing both sizes, but only the 12.9-inch screen size will get the mini LED display, which is a bit bizarre because Apple hasn't done mini LED before on any of their other devices. It's very similar to what the Pro Display XDR does, but it's technically not mini LED. And simultaneously, it's also weird to hear that the 11-inch iPad Pro would only be getting a CPU boost and 5G modem support if you're willing to opt extra for that, which in my opinion isn't even a big deal because most people, I feel like, would rather hotspot off their phone anyway, and you can save yourself a lot of money up front if you just buy the Wi-Fi version. Plus, it's the pandemic, more people working from home and stuff. So some of you might like your cellular iPads and you'll have a 5G option soon. Congratulations. But that 11-inch iPad Pro definitely feels like it has barely been changed since they announced it in 2018 with the single camera system. Probably don't expect many camera upgrades with these iPad Pros, but the A14X chip is potentially going to be about as fast as the M1, just maybe lacking a Thunderbolt controller. And that could result into some really, really powerful gains if they launch some software to take advantage of the A14X chip later in the year. I think if they don't update the software and bring some pro-class editing apps to the iPad, then A14X chip will be great and fast, but really not a ton of use cases for it on traditional iPad OS as it stands today. We even saw some leaked dummy models that were reported on by Sonny Dixon, who has a bit of a spotty track record. He was the guy who got me really, really excited for Apple Silicon iMacs to get unveiled at quadruple UDC last year. Obviously, that didn't happen, so I'm a bit pessimistic towards his reports, but he did show these dummy model iPads that show that the overall design of the iPad Pros probably isn't going to look that different. The mini LED display on the larger size is most likely going to be the biggest difference we can appreciate, but he also included what is supposed to be the updated iPad Mini 6, which started off as this really, really hopeful improvement because I was hearing reports of them making the screen size bigger and having like around an 8.5-inch screen on the iPad Mini, and I thought they were going to borrow a lot of the design language from the iPad Air 4 and just bring it to a smaller design, which sounds amazing because I love the iPad Mini. It just has somewhat dated hardware, still rocking a physical home button, still rocking pretty thick forehead and chin, and I would love for it to get a more updated design with USB-C, no home button, Face ID even if they could do that, but sounds like they want to have yet another year with the iPad Mini 6 rocking Lightning, rocking a home button, and still rocking that dated design, which probably does keep the price down, which some people probably appreciate, but iPad Minis do not get refreshed every year, which is why this bums me out a bit, because if we get the iPad Mini 6, could be next week or it could be in June, they're likely not going to update it again for at least another 2 years. Sometimes they wait even longer between iPad Mini refreshes, and I'm glad that they're at least keeping it around. It would bum me out if they just discontinued it entirely, because I do think there's an amazing market for an iPad OS device that you can hold with one hand. It's great for college students, it's great for note-taking, and I think if they really, really updated the hardware to more flagship levels of specs, it could almost be an iPhone replacement to some, and when I say some, I'm referring to myself. I would love to do an iPad Mini instead of iPhone challenge, but the fact that the hardware on it is still so last decade, it's very hard to switch to, so I'm hoping that it's not too long before we see an iPad Mini Pro variant where it has some more up-to-date design, it has some more up-to-date specs. Even if the price is high, I wouldn't mind spending $500 or more on a really small compact iPad just for the fact that it's compact and portable. It doesn't have have to be cheap, although I get that that's a great selling point of the iPad mini right now is its affordability, but I do think overall the main purpose of iPad affordability should still be going towards the budget iPad, as I call it. Apple just calls it iPad, but those have been updated pretty much every single year since 2017 when they first unveiled it. It's stuck with that $329 price point. They updated it in 2018, 2019, and 2020. On the website, it's still listed as new, even though it was unveiled in September, so it's definitely been out for a while, but the design has really not changed much. It's still a 10.2-inch display, same as 2019. They gave it the A12 chip, and now it ships with a fast charger in the box, which is kind of cool, given iPhones don't even get slow chargers in the box anymore. But I do think it's safe to say we should expect another budget iPad this year. Probably not going to be in the summer. If anything, they would launch this alongside the iPhone 13 later in the year. That's when they unveiled the iPad 8th generation last year, but this one might actually get some design improvements. So there have been a few rumors brewing around that Apple would actually give a thinner design to the iPad 9, and that would allow it for perhaps a laminated display, which is the biggest drawback of the budget iPad ever since they unveiled it in 2017. Ever since they've been comfortable selling new iPads at around $300, they've always lacked that laminated display, which in my opinion, if you have used a laminated display on an iPad and you go to one that's non-laminated, it's very annoying and distracting. But if you've never used a laminated iPad and you just pick up the budget iPad, tech specky little difference that, like, if you don't know to look for it, you're not going to be bothered by it, but if you do notice it, it's very hard to unnotice in my experience. So that's why finding out that an affordable iPad could end up having a laminated display, also a bigger one. It sounds like they might want to have a 10.5-inch screen this year. Not really sure on the silicon. I'd be somewhat surprised if they decided to give it the A13 chip, just because budget iPad in the past went from A10 to A12. It never got the A11, so they appear to like to skip a year sometimes with the silicon in that. So I wouldn't be shocked if later in the year, probably around fall or winter time, they launched the iPad 9th generation with an A14 chip, but of course by that time iPhones are already rocking A15 chip. So it's not insanely fast, but still a really, really powerful processor for a $300 iPad that would still be thinner than the last generation, have a bigger display and a laminated one, and that could be just a game changer for a lot of people that want to still be able to use the Smart Keyboard and the Apple Pencil. But of course it will still probably be rocking a home button and Lightning, so it's still going to be using the old dated Apple Pencil. That way iPad Air can kind of sit in its own department. And yeah, I think iPad Air is the only iPad I would not expect Apple to refresh this year. They waited a long time before the iPad Air 3 after the iPad Air 2 launch, many years before we got the third generation, and then it was about a year and a half before Apple updated the iPad Air 4, and that just launched like last October, and it doesn't seem to be the type of iPad Apple likes to refresh annually. So is there something they could do with the iPad Air this year? I mean, it's already got the A14 chip. I think that ProMotion, 120 hertz is probably going to stay a Pro feature, not come to the entry-level model. It's already got USB-C. It's already got Apple Pencil 2 support. So honestly, I can't even really think of what they want to do next for the iPad Air. In fact, I have a belief that we might actually be waiting a long time before we get an iPad Air 5. Maybe not even next year, because Apple's going to be trying really hard to figure out how to differentiate the iPad Pro lineup from the iPad Air lineup, which already the 11-inch iPad Pro and 10.9-inch iPad Air have a lot of similarities, considering iPad Pro 11-inch is still going to be rocking an LCD display, not mini LED. And if anything, I could almost see Apple wanting to discontinue the 11-inch iPad Pro because it's too similar to the iPad Air, and maybe they'll decide the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is the only iPad Pro. I know there's a lot of 11-inch iPad Pro fans out there that would hate for that to happen. I just want to be realistic and say, I mean, are these competing a little too closely with each other? Hopefully that doesn't happen. For the record, there haven't been any rumors or leaks of them discontinuing the 11-inch Pro, so I hope it doesn't. But either way, there should be at least 4 new iPads to expect by the end of this year, and we've gotten none so far, so that's somewhat exciting. And on top of that, I'm hoping iPadOS can truly take advantage of the A14X chip and give it some pro-class applications. Give it some more Mac features like revamped external monitor support or external webcam support. Those types of things would be amazing, and I'm curious what you guys are most excited for in the iPad lineup this year. Is it the iPad 9, Mini 6, or the new iPad Pros that could be launching as soon as next week? Feel free to let me know. This is your Apple Sheep here. We'll see you guys in the next one.